Welcome to the LivXplore Podcast. If you like what you hear, please hit like and subscribe. Hi, I'm Sean Payne, owner and founder of LivXplore Real Estate and Lifestyle. Today I have with me Isaiah Chass, our founding agent.
Hi everyone, good seeing y'all.
And we also have Britt Esser from MyNHD to talk about natural hazard reports and what they are. Britt, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Sean. Good to see you.
Cool. Well, let's jump right into it. What is an NHD?
What is the natural hazard disclosure? Well, historically, it goes back to how does the realtor prepare the buyer for what are they getting into with their property? And so if you look back about 30 years ago, it was a document that geologists thought it'd be helpful to have the agent give the buyer something to kind of give them an idea of here's what could happen in the area from a earthquake, fire, flood. And so they formalized in 1998 with the Natural Hazard Disclosure Act, which is 1103. And it's basically the 6 things that we feel we need to be telling buyers. Do I need to have insurance for specific things that are going to affect the property? So you've got the special flood hazard area, the dam inundation, very high fire, wildland fire, earthquake fault zone, and seismic. I always try to remember all 6 specifically. But and then there's some other things that people have popped up with, radon gas, or Megan's Law has come up as well. So there's a few different areas where this report, which used to be a couple of pages, is now almost 50 pages if it's a respectable, report from a brand that you trust.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And out of the 6, what would you say? What are like the 2 disclosures, or like what do you find that you're most dealing with, or the questions that way out of those disclosures?
The joy I have in this job is getting the call from someone like yourself and saying, I have a buyer, they're a little worried. Uh-huh. And what could possibly be the first or second thing? Currently, we're going to run into fire stuff.
Right.
I mean, looking at the recent events, the fires in 2017 changed the way that we even look at the state. And really, when we had that affecting all of us, you knew that there was going to be some legislation that was going to be enacted. And so that's how Assembly Bill 38 and now Senate Bill 63 are coming to pass as sort of the standard for, rather than waiting for a horrific event to occur and then having insurance and all these other things really slow down the process of having people recover. Mm-hmm. We would like for the buyer to be aware that certain steps have either been in place or started to be put in place as far as hardening the home for a fire. The Defensible Act, or Defensible Space part of the act, is really all about making sure that 100 foot certain things are done, 30 feet, and then 6 feet from the actual structure.
And that's part of Senate Bill 38, is that?
Assembly Bill 38, is all about making sure that if these things were done, let's make sure the buyer knows.
Okay.
And so the way that that's enforced is using either CAL FIRE from a state level, but if you're within the city, maybe you're using, in our case, Petaluma Fire Department.
Right.
And they would be the ones that come in and do an inspection, hopefully months before the house is put on the market. But if not, then this particular part of the report will say, hey, you're in a fire zone. Let's make sure that you have somebody from Petaluma Fire Department come in, take a look at the property, and see what needs to be done. The seller then provides that inspection to the buyer. What happens next? Well, as the market has clearly changed, the buyer now has the number in front of them of, okay, I have some work to do that either I am going to pay for or possibly ask the seller to pay for. Uh-huh. There are cases where timeliness, everything's moving along, escrow is going to close and this doesn't get done in time. So now you've got the buyer, sort of in a situation where they're signing it and saying, I'll take care of it over the next year. But that's the big one. I mean, I will tell you that the best part about what I'm doing right now is just making sure that if you were in a situation as an agent and the buyer had a question, you have someone to call. You have an expert. So it's me not being able to like sell the property. It's my ability to sort of educate them and then say, here's what we can do to make sure you understand. Here are the facts of what's been presented, and then they decide if that risk is worth it. But fire insurance is complicated
right
now, and it's not easy to maneuver. So we want to make sure that we're giving them everything we can before they purchase.
Right.
And AB 38 and the fire hazard, that was a really big one recently. How about on the flood side that's involved with that? That needs to be seen in the report.
I got a lot of flood questions. I started in this industry about 6 years ago. So when I started pre the fires, it was all about flood. And especially Sonoma, Marin, Napa, you're going to have a lot of flood zones. Flood zones have a few different differentiators, but the biggest thing would be if you're in a severe flood zone area, zones A or V, it'll pop up on the report, and that'll immediately signal to the agent, we got to talk to the buyer about flood insurance. If you're in that 500-year flood zone, which sounds like a long time, but it will happen in our,
areas such as
Great
Gurnville.
500-year flood zone is not. It's not going to take 500 years. 100-year flood zone is not going to take 100 years generally. So
the clock doesn't start the day you buy the house. So what you have then is the changing of our ecological areas means that these flood zones are constantly updated, and I'll actually jump into how that occurs with the mapping. But if a flood zone pops up, what we want to make sure is that the buyer goes, okay, I know that I can afford this and this and this, but I got to make sure I talk to my insurance person.
Sure.
What's my flood insurance going to cost? If you get that wrong, or if the map is wrong and it doesn't show the buyer that they're in a flood zone, that is where we start to tiptoe into
Disclosure.
legality.
Right.
Yeah. And was it properly disclosed? Who's responsible for the accuracy of that flood map? So
let's dive into that. Who is responsible for that accuracy of that flood map? I mean, like back up. One of the reasons why an NHD is provided is because a seller and a seller's agent has a legal responsibility to disclose this information to a buyer. Did I say that right, or did I say?
I think you got
a seller and a seller's agent has a responsibility to disclose this information to a buyer and a buyer's agent. But as realtors or real estate experts, but how do we compile this information? And then that's why we lean on the NHD that way. So so can you go into a little bit about like how this information is compiled and,
Sure.
and in the event there is an inaccuracy, what happens there? So
there's a number of different ways. I'll backtrack a little bit and just say that we all want to be pulling the best data possible.
Sure.
The best data possible also happens to be the most expensive data. So when you're looking at the industry as a whole, the natural hazard disclosure industry, there are 37 plus companies, give or take every couple of years, some fade away, but completely unregulated companies. So there's no requirement that they get the best data for your county or your city area.
Are you saying 37 NHD companies
yeah.
or companies that NHDs use to compile the information?
You can get your data. Well, they have to get data from the state
Okay.
area, for their specific
Right.
severe flood area. But the actual valuable information that we like to kind of pride ourselves on would be, how do we get the most accurate local map for a flood zone?
Right.
And so if you kind of think of it like a pyramid, the cream of the crop would be local, city level. So did Petaluma go out and actually canvass all of the area and see which of these homes is in a flood zone? If they didn't do it recently, then we definitely have county. County is probably the modern standard. And then the state is what everybody's required to get. It's done, not very often. Yeah, in fact, I think locally it's like 6 or 7 years old. So you really do want to make sure that if you're looking at these reports, checking the date of the actual flood map is kind of important, because you could be looking at a report, the cost of a report can be $50
Right.
on the low end,
Right.
up to $140. So why is this so much less expensive, you'll very quickly understand that it's a very thin report, and it's very old maps, and
I see.
You don't have any insurance or any specific language to protect you as the agent.
I think that's a really good topic to talk about as well. Is that, what is that?
That's definitely where we're going to address that. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So you have to pay for these maps at the state level to make sure that they're accurate. Like if a new map comes out, it's not released. I mean, the state doesn't release it.
Everyone. If you look at an MyNHD, it's all public information.
Right, exactly.
It's how our process has pulled, almost 100 different data sources into this one very easy to understand, concise report. But if you personally were to try and go out and pull all this together, it would take you weeks.
Oh, yeah, it wouldn't happen.
And I can deliver it to you in 30 minutes.
Right.
So my process is we're pulling the most current state, county, and city maps as fast as we possibly can, identifying the parcel, making sure it gets a designation that you and the, obviously, buyer and seller can understand, and then saying, here's how we're going to back it up with the sourcing. So that's really where, what separates the industry is how efficiently the company is able to provide the best data, make it easy to understand, and then support it with either extremely strong E&O insurance, a geological person on staff, bringing in local experts like myself to just make sure that the realtors, the buyers, the sellers all have somebody they can lean on. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Let's get back to your question.
Yeah. So what there is a difference across the board between companies. What does that language provide? What does that protection provide for each party involved in transaction when selecting an MyNHD source?
Well, it's kind of an interesting thing. I have to go out into the world and make sure that my primary job is to get the real estate brokers, agents, and their clients to understand that what we provide is a very, very good source of protection. What my owner, Eric Spitz, he's been around for 35 years, wants to make sure is that everyone also knows that he's paying for really good E&O insurance in case there were to be an error, which we've never had to rely on E&O insurance, but if there were to be an error, a $10 million policy is going to cover Sean, and it's going to cover the agent, and it's going to cover the seller, and it's going to cover the transaction coordinator, which is sort of a rare thing in our industry. So there's a lot of people involved, but what that really means is that if you look at all these different companies and all the different issues that come into putting together the report, the biggest thing is, are you protected by the language within the terms and conditions? If I look at the final page of my report, there are 13 different things in there, and the last one says, we stand by you no matter what's in this report with our insurance. Most companies are going to be very careful about how they word that, because if they make an error, are they on the hook for $50,000, $100,000? And then if they're not responsible for it, then does it fall on the agent?
Right.
And we've seen, I have an entire file of just cases of disclosure. And I think, again, that opens up another box of questions, like, how often does something go wrong? Right now, we're looking at the largest increase in disclosure cases in real estate in history. It went from about 2 to 3 years ago, it was 1 in 500 transactions.
Right.
1 in 300 is now the average.
Is that since COVID?
Yep.
Oh, I think when they ran this number, it was probably within the last 2 years. But the idea is you have people who just paid a lot of money for a real estate transaction, and something now in them has popped up, and they are looking for something that might have gone wrong. One of the documents that an attorney would very quickly point to is an unregulated one that has tons of different holes possibly. Go in and start combing through the language and find something wrong.
Right.
So when you look through the disclosure packet on a real estate transaction, that may be one of the first things that they can attack. The advertising is phenomenal now that you see out there for real estate attorneys who really are, keen to the idea of, we can find $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 for a buyer who may just be kind of disappointed in the fact that they paid a high price for the property, And now things are shifting.
Yeah, that anytime you come out of a hot market, you see that. I would assume that if it's you're saying the numbers from the last 2 years have been 1 in 300, let's wait 18 months and see what the number of lawsuits are per transaction then, because I think we're just the people that have purchased in the end of 2021 and 2022 are the ones that really may have paid at the highest part of the market that way. So
I'll give you a funny situation. I went and did a thing with the CAL FIRE inspector, and he, of all the people I thought would probably not have an opinion on this, he was the one who said, when we start looking at these AB 38 fire situations, we feel like that is where the biggest issue is going to arise in real estate disclosure law, because you're going to have the buyer who did not get their inspection stuff done, or they didn't get all the things lined up. They closed the deal.
right.
And then they got that call, email, whatever, from an attorney and said, hey, notice that your property is in a fire zone. Would you like for us to take a look at your case and see if possibly there was something wrong with the AB 38?
Right.
I mean, I remember when they very first released that, and there was a meeting with, I think maybe CAL FIRE members and maybe California Association of Realtor members, and there was so much gray area between that of who's responsible for what.
It is a very hard to navigate thing, and that is, again, probably 3 to 4 phone calls a week. I'm just making sure that I'm helping people navigate through. The law is written somewhat confusingly, and they've even got I don't know, they have a great word for it, tree of reason or path of knowledge. It sounds like something out of Lord of the Rings, but it's like you follow this to sort of figure out, is it in a state zone? Turn left. Is it in a fire zone in the city? Turn right. And you basically have to maneuver your way to what are you signing. And I think every brokerage is also kind of like, well, I don't want to over disclose, but I do have to put the required document in there.
Right.
Is the FHDS, the fire hardening disclosure statement, in there needlessly?
Right.
And then the other question would be, am I scaring a buyer by adding something that quite literally says, you don't need to worry, we did the inspections, you're in the clear? If they don't understand what they're looking at, they could just see fire and go, I'm out.
Yeah. Well, that's what a good agent should be walking them through that language, making sure that they understand it that way. So yeah, that's we recently had a builder that we work with built some homes in one area, didn't have the AB 38 come into play, then built a home in another area that was high fire risk, and tried to explain to them and kind of went through the process of AB 38, and that they had to jump through an additional hoop to get it inspected by the fire department.
It's tricky because it's a state requirement, so it's a city final inspection for final occupancy doesn't count towards that, even though you'd think they'd kind of overlap and communicate it. It's not that case.
We changed the actual format of our report and put what I feel is one of the most obvious, obnoxious, bright colored, hey, you're in an AB 38 situation on our first page, just for this reason, because we felt like people were whipping through it too fast.
Sure.
And especially in the age of e-signing, docu-signing,
Right.
you can whip through your reports too fast and then realize
that happens all the time.
It was a state area, click this link. Oh, but you're actually in a county area, call these people.
Right.
So we've made it very simple if you just follow the steps on page 1, but boy, I still get a lot of calls.
That's a great segue. So walk us through your report. Like, some people will be able to watch the YouTube video, but a lot of people will just be listening to this, so they don't have the visual. So can you just walk us through verbally how your report's structured? Yeah, how your report's structured that way, and obviously the important information is usually at the front, but then you have the supporting documents. So just how does that work? What would people see?
Well, and I was going to say, this is one of the other fun parts of my job, is that the brokerages that just say, all right, I need you to come in, new agents, you're going to go through a report with them. And so what we do is we put the report in front of them and say, if you had to sit with your buyer, here's what I would like for you to look at first. The seller is going to provide the report. They are the ones that sign it, the seller and the seller's agent. Right. Once the buyer has signed the report, they have accepted all of these things that are within there. So what we're saying is, slow down. You've got the first page, which is an invoice. It shows the date, the reason that we have the invoice on there. is so that you can see that this thing is official once it is signed and paid for. And that's also when the insurance policy would kick in with us. So at that point, the official start of the report is the AB 38 page if it's in a severe fire zone. If it's not, you won't appear in our report.
Right.
We even had to go an extra step. If it was in AB 38, we even included the fire hardening disclosure statement on the last 2 pages. So we quite literally had to sandwich this, fire thing in front of people so they wouldn't miss it. So then you've got the AB 38. If it doesn't apply, you're on to what's called the state signature page, which is basically the big 6 of the, which I went over before with the
Right.
Natural Hazard Disclosure Act. So your floods, your fires, your earthquakes. And then, they have to agree that they've at least looked at that page. What I always tell people to do, jump right past that. Remember the pyramid, that was the bottom layer of information.
Right.
It is the oldest, and it's not going to be what really is truly going to get to the meat of the report. The next section is the summary. And we call it the summary because for 2 pages, you are going to go down every single one of those local, current, accurate areas that really dive into what's truly going on. So I've had it occur where the state has not gone and mapped a particular earthquake area, but the county did. And lo and behold, Napa was a perfect example, where it was covered in these little spider veins of a fault line that when the maps were updated, the county updated. So therefore, you wouldn't have seen that your home was in a earthquake zone on the state signature page, but you would definitely have seen it on my summary page for the county.
Okay.
So they can actually
Right.
conflict with each other. And that's where we slowly have the agent kind of peel back and go, all right, so we've got yes, 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 no, no, no. You're looking for the yeses,
Right.
or you're looking for the in or the out. And if it's in, then you're looking at, certain particular areas would be the radon stuff or Megan's Law. Our report includes a lot of the stuff that has to do with the land around it. It also has to do with tax stuff, which, again, not to get too deep into that because it can get a little verbose. But you're going to have an actual breakdown of what local taxes, a Melrose, 1915 Bond Act. If you're in one of those, and I'll shortly jump into what a Melrose could do, if they decided to do a specific thing to raise money, and
Like a new development's coming in,
Yeah.
they need housing, fire stations, things of that
perfect.
nature.
Yeah,
Yep.
we're going to do something for the school. We're going to put in new childcare, whatever,
Right.
daycares. But if you don't pay that one part of your property tax, it's considered a lien on the property. Accelerated foreclosure can kick in. So you may have this massive property tax bill, but that one section will be what could actually get you removed from your home. So we have to make sure that the agent sees, oh, is this in Melrose? Okay, we got to make sure we tell the buyer that that small portion is going to need to be paid if you don't want to pay everything else.
Right.
So
Cool.
And can you talk about what an insurance company will look at for what triggers an added coverage?
That's a good question.
great question. So that is another thing that I get. What we love about working with insurance agents is that they tend to say natural hazard disclosure has the good stuff, the good data. They have their own maps. I mean, they clearly have their areas where there is a lot of risk. They probably have different rates based on how their map is drawn for an area. Ours is coming from a state, a county, or a city, so it's unbiased. But if I were to have a parcel with a home that had the house at the top of the hill and the creek, gorgeous view, creek running down
Right.
below, sitting in a flood zone. Well, to the insurance company, they're looking at their map. That house is in a flood zone. We'll take that flood insurance, right
Right.
away. But my report is going to say that while it is, a portion of it is in a flood zone, we are going to also provide a FEMA flood certificate that says the structure is out of the flood zone. So therefore, you will not be required to have that flood insurance. With that, an NHD and a FEMA flood certificate, most of your insurance companies are going to say you're in the clear.
So just not all NHDs do provide a flood certificate. You guys do.
We want
So
to
that's
always.
definitely a huge benefit of using.
Imagine losing a deal
Right.
over something as simple as $1,500 worth of flood insurance, and really it just comes down to the trust that a buyer has. They don't want to have surprises at the last second.
Right.
So
Well, usually what happens is it gets addressed, but as agents, then we have to go out and do research and try to find that flood certificate. Some municipalities keep like databases of them and stuff like that, but it still can take some time to do it. So it's really nice to have that up front that way.
Yeah.
So that's
the
a
AB
huge
38 thing, we want to make sure that's caught. With the flood insurance thing, we want to make sure that's caught. Anything else, the Mellorews, I was going to say another section that's been kind of fun for us to make sure that people catch. Anybody signing up for solar these days?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you think you're getting $0 per month as far as your bill because you're getting a lot of credits, but a PACE lien, a property clean energy lien, is applied to the property, not to the person who signed up for the contract.
Right.
So imagine the buyer who goes to buy the house and they're like, oh, $700,000. Wait, what's this extra $35,000?
Uh-huh.
Well, that's 30 years of payments. Well, they didn't sign that contract. So we want to make sure that in the report they see PACE lien attached. Here's what you're going to. It's just one more thing where let's not have them come back year later and go, we don't want this solar.
Sure. Right.
So.
And can you talk back a little bit more about the, protection side? So if you look at some home inspections and pest inspections, they only cover who it's, sometimes paid for, or who pays for it, or who it's ordered by. Who, on an NHD side, can you talk about who it protects? Everyone involved? Just the...
Yeah. I kind of glossed over that, I feel like. But the big thing right now is that we want to make sure that a buyer looks to see what's in the report. We want the seller to look and see in the terms and conditions who's covered. The language in there can be all over the board. So while we tend to over cover, some companies say we will cover the cost of the report, all $70 of it. Well, that seems like kind of the minimum amount.
Right.
I've had others where I've read through it and seen that the maximum they would do is something like small claims court. Most of them want to just go straight to arbitration, where in that case, if the agent or the broker were to lose, all the costs would be paid for by the seller, the agent, and the broker.
Right.
It can get nasty. I mean, I feel like because it's unregulated, you really do want to do some homework in selecting the company that's going to protect you, and then have a little more education with your NHD person saying, okay, so also teach me, what am I supposed to say here and there, and then when to not say anything and make a phone call. Because I like the idea that almost like a part of your team, you have your home warranty expert, you've got your insurance expert, you've got your lending expert, but if there's a creek on the property,
Right.
can I call my person and say, I just want to make sure I say the right thing, or I send the right email, or whatever, or can I have the buyer just call you? Once you order an NHD, my protection begins with you. So what I love to tell an agent is order early.
Yeah.
There is no law limiting you to when you can get the report.
Sure.
There is a law as to when you absolutely have to give the buyer a copy of it. And that's one of the things that people do run into, is that if you were to get into escrow, the NHD is the absolute easiest way to get out of a deal. The 3-day right of rescission is not a joke, and buyers can find something in there and go, this scares me too much, I'm out. Whereas if you were to order an NHD
prior to,
you sign the listing agreement, you can order an NHD. I get text messages all day, it's the address, get it out to me. I have agents that as they're driving towards doing a listing appointment, they'll be like, I want to take a look at it, or better yet, why don't you take a look at it and tell me, is there anything I need to know before I walk in and be the resourceful agent? And so you order this thing, you get a great look at it, you see that there's solar, you see that there might be flood, you're coming in, prepared, and then that goes right into a disclosure packet. And if they get that and they show that they have received it and signed that they received it, you're in the clear.
Yep, exactly.
So
Yep. Cool.
best practices.
Yep. Very cool. Anything else we haven't covered that you'd like to cover that way regarding the NHD?
It's one of those things where we like to say it's not a problem until it's a problem.
Sure.
I understand that. As far as the totem pole of importance, I'm coming down a little lower. But then we've always felt like there is going to be that moment where, oh my gosh, how did we miss this? Or worse, did it not seem important at the time, and then 6 months later, it's the buyer saying, I don't understand. Like, how is this not something that was addressed? And so we like to make sure that if we're disclose in the report, then you don't have that
conversation
what do
down
we
the
call
road.
it? The commission haircut.
Right. Sure. Cool.
Yeah.
So what's the best way for people to get a hold of you if they have any NHD needs as an agent or a seller or just have questions about the report that way?
Well, I think the most important thing is if they want information about the natural hazard disclosure, go to CAR, go to the California Association of Realtors. Like I said, the owner of our company is fanatical about learning and growing and bringing in best processes. CAR loves to kind of rely on him as sort of one of the legends. So I like to send people that way first because there is going to be the most current legal information. As far as me personally, I have a great little website, MyNHD.com. You can learn all you need. All of our resources regarding fire, flood, earthquake. We've got some great booklets. Everything's digital. I didn't bring it up before, but I will say the best part about an NHD now is it's not 50 pages of paper. You can pull it up on an iPad, and everything is hot links. You just, or hyperlinks. You can just pop into it and see some really cool high-resolution maps as opposed to the pixelated stuff from the 90s when these things first were invented. So go to MyNHD. Anybody can order an NHD. So even somebody who owns a home right now and just wants to get the most current information, they could go and get a report and pay for it. We're $95, so it's not a crushing expense. But
sure.
Yeah, and that's the easiest way. I mean, most of the agents, I think, as far as their practices, they like to make sure that they tell a transaction coordinator to order it early, make sure that, you've got the invoice in there, and if there was any AB 38, we're trying now to teach the transaction coordinators to catch an AB 38 thing, bring it to you, bring it to whoever, and say, hey, I'm going to double check on the inspection. So, yeah, and then, I mean, if you want people to reach out to me, I'm sure you can find us on, numerous transaction coordinator platforms. So
cool.
That's an option too.
No, that's great. Well, thank you very much for joining us. It's been really informative. Isaiah, what do you think? You have anything else to say?
I think that covered it, but definitely, I think if anyone has further questions, they should certainly reach out.
Yep, that's great.
Yeah.
I'm Sean Payne, owner and founder of LivXplore Real Estate and Lifestyle. Thank you very much for joining us. If you enjoyed this podcast, please hit like and subscribe so that you can see future episodes. Isaiah, thank you very much for joining us today.
Absolutely.
And Britt, you as well.
Thank you so much, Sean. Appreciate it. Yeah.
See you guys next time.
Fun.
Bye, guys. Welcome to the LivXplore Podcast. If you like what you hear, please hit like and subscribe.